Okay. We are finally back to working on this project. So the client sent a ton of transfers, which is fine, very helpful. But there's only this many 3D icons. I thought there'd be more. It's a ton of HQ icons, but only 3 squads. It's basically 3 squads. Skulls are generally red. Everything else is apparently white. So I guess the logical thing to do is to paint this white, paint the skulls red by brush. Yeah. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to prime that up first. Yeah. I'm going to hit it with black first, though, to give a little definition of this thing. Ugh. Okay, we'll let that cure. Find somewhere to put it. That's fine. All right, we'll let that cure. Come back to it in a little bit. What we do know is because there's only that many, I don't have enough to do all those models, so I'm going to go ahead and get all the other Marines out. We've already finished. And we're just going to spend a couple hours doing some transfers. So these are all the models that we worked on back in November. And I guess what we should do is figure out which models will take transfers well, which won't. So we should separate them based on what they are. You guys are all elites, I think. Yeah, you guys all get the X's. We've got 20 of you. So we could do 10 and 10. We could do 10 with those and 10 with transfers. Here's a question. In your new list, let's take a look at that. Alright, of the new stuff, how many elites or rapid insertions are there? There's 20 more infiltrators. Oh no, that's the stuff I completed. 20 intercessors. So a ton of HQs, 6 outriders, but no troops. Okay. So I don't know. I only have 10 of those. Got 12 of those guys. I guess we should just put them on a squad. So one squad will get those 10. Another squad will get transfers. So let's pick 10 and 10. Obviously, these guys need a matte varnish. Alright. So U10 will get the 3D printed icons. U10 will get transfers. Let's also do whatever the fuck these guys are. Shit. Alright. Alright, so to start with, I will need. That's nice. Those 10.
He also worried people didn't want to hear a story like that because, we live in these incredibly cynical, sarcastic times. And it's not, Soul is not an edgy film. It's an earnest film, and we're just at a time when being earnest feels almost edgy because no one's earnest anymore. And it's just coincidence? Is it coincidence? Is it fate that we would find ourselves at the tail end of a year? I always thought that the story we're trying to tell felt like a bit more of a holiday film. So, when we got pushed, while we were disappointed to see our release dates getting pushed, June always struck me as like, really, a summer movie? I always felt like we were more meant for the holidays. So then at the end of all this to be coming out on Christmas, I don't know, it just feels like it was meant to be.
Well, it's such a gift. I love this film so much, Kemp, and this has been so much fun. Thanks for coming on Script Apart.
Oh, my pleasure.
You've been listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Cameron Demek, with music from Stefan Bindley-Taylor. Get in touch. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or you can email us, thescriptapartpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Twas the night before Christmas, and on the tower, everyone was partying except for one wallflower. John McClane missed his wife, thinks just weren't the same, says Holly had moved west and changed her last name. A truck had pulled up, and who should disembark but 14 men whose intentions were dark.
Welcome to Script Apart, a podcast about the first draft secrets of great movies. Each episode, we speak to a brilliant screenwriter who's kindly dug out their initial screenplay for what became a beloved movie, discussing what changed, what didn't, and why, from first draft to the big screen. On this very special festive bonus episode of Script Apart, we're celebrating the holidays the only way we could, with a deep dive into the writing of Die Hard, with none other than the film's co-writer, Stephen E. D'Souza. Yes, it's a Christmas film. In fact, for countless people around the world, Die Hard is the Christmas movie, a touching Yuletide tale of family reconciliation that just so happens to feature a ton of explosions. Die Hard is a film that needs no introduction, but here's a short one anyways. Bruce Willis became a megastar after his role in this 1988 action classic, starring as John McClane, a no-nonsense New York City cop who becomes embroiled in a terrorist takeover of his wife's workplace, the Nakatomi Tower in Los Angeles. McClane ventures to LA intent on winning back his estranged wife Holly. John's not the only uninvited guest, however, who turns up at her company's Christmas party. Enter Hans Gruber, one of the greatest action villains in movie history, played by the late, great Alan Rickman. Stephen, who had previously written Commando, came on board the project after screenwriter Jeb Stewart originated the film, adapting the 1978 novel Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe. Die Hard had been envisioned as Rambo in an office block, a gun-toting B-movie based on a book in which John is attempting to save his daughter, not his wife. The film, however, ended up becoming something grander, an action movie that broke almost every action movie rule, hiding his sentimental heart and redefining American movie masculinity in the process. In the conversation you're about to hear, Stephen and I cover pretty much everything about this timeless action adventure. From his home in LA full of the wildest Die Hard memorabilia.
I may not need as many fire supports. So I've got 10 of those. I think you're a lieutenant, so you get an HQ. Interesting.
Imaginable, Stephen shared with us a ton of secrets from the development of Die Hard. Get ready to discover why he considers Hans Gruber to be the protagonist of Die Hard, why he and Jeb got rid of a plot thread that involved McClane fighting Hans Gruber's father in World War II, and why the film, in his opinion, is more of a Christmas movie than Bing Crosby's White Christmas. You're listening to Script Apart, hosted by me, Al Horner, produced by Camille Donet. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us on this special festive edition of Script Apart. As a certain New York cop might say, welcome to the party, pal. Die Hard occupies such an immense place in our pop culture, not just at Christmas, all the way through the year. What kind of place does it occupy in your life all this time on? How often do you find yourself thinking about this film and thinking about that character, John McClane?
It crosses my mind when I flip channels and it goes by. It seems to me it's always playing somewhere. I don't dwell on it, but it seems that every year when the holidays roll around, that all of a sudden it gets resurrected. People start hitting me up on social media. Do you think it's a Christmas movie? And I get various publications and magazines, and it's a regular thing now that it made is a Christmas movie, which I think would have been put to bed by now.
Yeah, right.
20th Century Fox. Here we have this, this one, right? Have you seen this?
Is that an advent calendar?
Have you seen this one?
I haven't, no.
Oh, it's a fake children's book. It's called, it says Die Hard Christmas, right? This is from 2 years ago. And it looks like a children's book, the illustrated holiday classic. And it's a parody of the Night Before Christmas poem. So it's the night before Christmas, and up in the tower,
everyone was partying except for one wallflower. John McClane missed his wife, thinks just weren't the same, since Holly had moved west and changed her last name. A truck had pulled up and who should disembark but 14 men whose intentions were dark. So I go, well, listen, the studio says it's a Christmas movie, right? They've got a Die Hard Christmas and the what was it, the 30th anniversary re-release of the blue was in a steel case with like, this looked like a Christmas sweater. I don't know if we had that in the UK, so it seems undeniable now, but I still have to I finally made a chart up. I'll share it with you. It's the chart proving it's a Christmas movie by comparing it to White Christmas. We can all agree, I hope, that the Bing Crosby movie from 1954-55, White Christmas, is a Christmas movie. Yeah. I have a checklist showing that Die Hard is inarguably more Christmassy than White Christmas. So I can enumerate it right now, but it's probably better seen than described.
I should mention for the listeners as well that we've had many guests on this show, but no one has quite come close to the treasure trove of memorabilia that is Steven's backdrop right now.
Everybody has their here's my very first job in Hollywood, so I have memorabilia from that. It's just amazing. We got Commando.
Oh, there he is. That's the guy.
So I'd rather have this shelf than Oscars.
In the 32 years since Die Hard came out, have you figured out what it is about the film that struck such a chord? Behind you is this kind of Santa's grotto of awesome, John McClane toys and some books and things like that. Not every single action film gets that response. Not every single action film people are still talking about after all this time. What do you put it down to? The coloring book. That's amazing.
I think it was kind of a perfect Venn diagram of a number of trends. And the main one was it was almost like a palate cleanser or a course correction after these kind of preposterous movies, some of which I had a hand in which the heroes were all these superhuman, bigger than life figures. Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and although I didn't work with him, Chuck Norris, there was a whole line of things where the heroes were just these preposterous role models. This, fortunately, was, like a pendulum swing, a course correction, and it was welcome. And it's funny, it didn't have to be that way, because when they sent the picture out, despite the fact that the script was written to be kind of a normal, grounded hero, the studio could not restrain itself from insistently go to the usual suspects. So the script was sent to Stallone. It was sent to Schwarzenegger. There's a famous list somewhere, and then Richard Gere turned it down. Jimmy Kahn, to this day, says, what was I thinking? They went to everybody, and then it was one of those situations where the studio had a release date, like you're chasing a release date, and they're in a panic, and they went to Bruce Willis in desperation. This is a famous story. And he got $5 million, which was a record-breaking price for a movie star at that point. Richard Dreyfuss, who was a friend of mine, he fired his agent the next day and said, I haven't got an Academy Award, I don't get $5 million. So it had repercussions that went all through the town. And I think had we not had Die Hard with Bruce Willis as a very grounded hero, you would not have had Keanu Reeves as an action star. You would not have had Mark Wahlberg as an action star. You would not have had, I don't think you would have had, might not have had Daniel Craig as Bond. I mean, Daniel Craig is, all the other Bonds were over 6 feet tall. Daniel Craig is what, 5'9", So I think it opened the door for a different kind of storytelling. And it also, to the degree that what makes something really catch fire is an audience kind of identifying and bonding with the lead. I mean, Star Wars works because despite the cosmic setting, you go, oh, it's a teenage lead. He's like me. He doesn't get along with his parents. He wants to get out of a small town. There's a starting point in a lot of big franchises where you can sort of identify with the lead character. The Marvel Universe, which dominates filmmaking now, exists because Stan Lee, who we've been lost recently and I knew very well, he had the brainstorm in the 1960s that the previous model for comic books, that you put a teenage sidekick in the story for the readers to identify with, he had the insight to go, you know what, the readers don't want to be the sidekick, they want to be the hero. And so Spider-Man revolutionized the comic book industry by having, a teenager as the lead. So the identifiable person. I think the Die Hard did that for the audience as well. You can say to yourself, wow, I could be that hero. He's scared, he's nervous, he's frightened, but he's still pulling it together. So I think that is what really was the magic, the secret ingredient in that film.
It was, as you said, game-changing. It did bring new things to the action genre. How much of its success do you put down to kind of like the emotional heft of the film? Because if you dig beneath the explosiveness of the film and all those incredible action beats, there's some actually pretty powerful undercurrents of family, responsibility, reconciliation, all things that are Christmas movie staples, we should add.
No, absolutely, that is a factor. I do not think it would have the legs it did were it not for that. I think that, again, it further allows you to identify with the hero. In other words, when they tell the hero, by the way, this is one of the things I think why the Daniel Craig Bonds have been working so well. There's a strong emotional underpinning. I believe that is the factor. It helps you identify it with it. You can say, I understand what he's fighting for. I mean, yes, he has to save everybody, he has to save the day, but he has to save the day because he's trying to save his loved one and get his marriage back on track. And it also, to the degree that somewhere I have the audience test scores, that the film tested higher with women than with men, which is very unusual for an action movie. So I think it allowed the audience to really engage with it in a way that you might not, like in a Chuck Norris movie, or where they say, "Here's your mission: someone stole an atomic bomb," and so it's more, it's kind of a more intellectual and at a remove. He says, "Well, we must save the world from nuclear proliferation." I mean, on an intellectual level, the audience can relate to that, but on an emotional level, they only relate to the bad guy. Oh, he kidnapped that woman. He's got a knife to her throat. So you get like a momentary spike of concern. But to a lesser degree, because the movie's kind of a cartoon, in Commando, that also made Commando work. That like it was a totally personal reason that he was involved in the story. He's invested in it. So that definitely is a factor, and I think that's also why it sort of like grew and developed a reputation as a Christmas movie. Now, we were not really thinking it was a Christmas movie. I mean, Joel Silver said, I want to do this movie because it's set at Christmas because it'll play on television every Christmas and we'll get a residual check. Not that it would become, it was only when I went to the set and saw not only a Christmas tree in the lobby, but decorations, but almost every desk, for the imaginary workers had like Christmas cards or stuffed Santas and stuff. And I go, hey, this really is pretty Christmassy. That's when it hit me. But I had no idea that it would it would become like an official entry in the Christmas movie sweepstakes.
The book that the film was loosely adapted from, adapted at first by Jeb, who you've spoken so warmly in the past about his magnificent work kind of breaking the story, because from the sounds of it, the book is quite dark. Definitely not a Christmas family movie.
No, it is Christmas. The movie does take place over the Christmas season, but it covers 3 or 4 days. Right. The compression was something that I would have normally be inclined to do. If you analyze my pictures, or most action movies, frankly, they take place in a short period of time. Commando, he sets his watch, right? Once they kidnap him, they say, we're putting you on a plane, you gotta whack your friend in Valverde. Oh, if only I copyrighted Valverde, which has now been in I think if you do the math, 35 movies. So that's 8 or 10 hours, 48 hours. Hello, the title is 48 hours. And I think if you look at, even Bond movies seem to take place, the Bond movie, it says, Blofeld has given us 72 hours to deliver, like $1 million or whatever it was, in those days. But it went with my natural inclination, and John also wanted it to be I think he said 12th Night or Midsummer's Night's Dream. He said made some kind of I think he said Midsummer's Night Dream is a strange thing because you have all these characters who are drawn into the story, and there's also some impersonations and things. So you have to talk to Sean McTiernan for his deep analysis of that. But the book does take place over Christmas. It does have the building taken hostage. Where the differences are is the character is in his 60s. He's a retired cop. He's visiting his daughter, who works for the company, who does fall out of the building.
Yeah.
He is severely wounded. The book ends on an ambiguous note. You don't know whether he's going to live or die because he's severely wounded, and he's fading in and out of consciousness as the paramedics are looking at him. So the bones are there. There is a sense of humor in the book, and there aren't the plot twists that we have. The problem with the book is a kind of a third person point of view. The entire book is seen through the eyes of the character. It's seen through his point of view. So there's large stretches where nothing is happening, where he's thinking about what can I do next. He's trying to figure out what's going on. There's a long flashback to when he thinks about his daughter in childhood, how they did not get along. He should have been a better father. It takes a whole. There's like a chapter or two before he gets to Los Angeles. It starts out in New York. He's about to leave. He stops somebody from stealing a car radio. He arrests the guy. Then he flirts with the stewardess on the plane. So we cut to the chase in the movie, and have this great condensed story. There's even in the book, he realizes that Hans is the son of a Nazi that he arrested during the war, because the book is published in the 70s, 60s. So in World War II, he was in Army intelligence, and he captured Hans Gruber's father, who was a Nazi, and he realizes that he met Hans Gruber when he visited his father in Spandau prison as a little boy. So there's all this stuff that's in the book that is not in the movie. And in the book, they really are the terrorists. They really have a legitimate, so to speak, bone of contention with the oil company. They are radical, like the Biedermannhof gang, whatever it was called in Germany. They are a version of that, and they are they complain about the company, and the company is in fact like evacuating and displacing indigenous tribes in Indonesia, indigenous people in Indonesia, to do this huge construction project, which is referenced in the movie when he says, models, I loved to make such when I was a child, the details. And Mr. Jockey says, is this about that? That's all rumors. We're not displacing indigenous people with that. So there's hints of the original plot of the movie, but John quite rightly said, you terrorists is like that's what you do in all the Chuck Norris movies, right? All the B movies, like terrorists, and but if they're thieves, it's more fun. And not only that, there's a long tradition of. I'm getting very granular now. It's not an action movie. This is technically an adventure process movie from the wrong side.
Yeah, it's like a
process movie is like Takapi, or the Dirty Dozen, or the Asphalt Jungle, or Big Deal on Madonna Street, where people are planning some operation, and we see them practice, and rehearse, and then they go do it, and it goes right or wrong. So this is really an adventure process movie flipped, where the team are the bad guys. So it helps. Actually, it helps when you're doing that, when you're writing it, because it gets you out of the rut of thinking, okay, what can happen now to the good guy? And you see a lot of action movies. You know that they're having trouble telling the story when the opening scene of an action movie is kind of a random scene where the hero stops a crime.
Yeah.
Like the opening scene, let's just stop a crime, just because the problem with franchise heroes is they can cannot wake up and be proactive. They have to be reactive. So a movie about a firefighter, firefighter can't wake up and say, I'm going to rescue a baby from a burning building today. Like, the fire has to start. The detective has to wait for the crime to be committed. So the solution to that, I do when I do seminars and I talk to writers, is look at this thing from the villain's point of view. There's a whole debate. I'm always in someone raises their hand. People confuse hero and villain with protagonist and antagonist, and they are not the same. The protagonist, which is again is a Greek word, was the first person to speak in the chorus, and the antagonist would say something contrary. So it happens all the time. Who's the protagonist of Jaws? It's the shark. Yeah, no, really, the protagonist of Die Hard is Hans Gruber. And, I have all these writers when I mentor them, and then they go, I'm having trouble with the obligatory scene. I have to do the obligatory scene, but then the movie doesn't get started. And I go, no, the obligatory scene is something that happened. It doesn't have to be in the movie. The obligatory scene of Die Hard was when the fast food was delivered to the apartment where Hans Gruber was recruiting guys for the mission. It's not in the movie. It was like 3 months earlier. Early, and you just have to know what happened. Yeah. So the way this movie got put together was realizing what it is. There's a lot of action, but it's actually an adventure process movie from the wrong side, constructed as a thriller.
So prior to this point, you had obviously been all the kind of like action staples that we're discussing. You had been involved in so many projects that helped establish a lot of those staples. Were you kind of conscious, or did you have a craving as you kind of came onto this project to like undo some of those things or sort of turn them on the head? Because this film, really does, as we've been discussing, do something different.
No, absolutely. I was aware that it was completely different, and that we were going against that. So what I would say as we were doing it, would say this is the opposite of Rambo. In Rambo, you remember there's a scene where the evil commies, and I had a whole career fighting commies, all the TV shows. And you remember I started out doing, I guess the $6 million man, that was one of my first gigs, right? Yeah. All those shows, they were always commies, partially because they would do these shows with the assistance of the Pentagon. So, like, in other words, they did stock footage, or he was supposed to, the $6 million man was in the Air Force, and they would let us go on Air Force bases and stuff. So, my break in Hollywood, I wrote a spec script, which was a body horror science fiction movie. It was sort of like Alien meets RoboCop, where a spaceship lands in a small town, and some kind of mechanical thing gets out and starts like chopping people up, and they find her. Did you ever read about the Mountains of Madness? No. H.P. Lovecraft. Where they find these people, they've been dissected and their parts are, oh my God. So it was like that. And then I got it somehow, long story to be told later, I got it to the producers of the $6 Million Man and me, and the first thing they do is we want you to rewrite this into a 2-hour, 2-part premiere, but you can't kill anybody, and the spoiler alert, the Renegade space probe can't be an American space probe that's going to high-wire. It has to be a Russian space probe. So I had a long experience doing the obvious things, communist villains, flag-waving heroes, and in Rambo, probably the last gasp of the commie villains, at one point they capture Stallone, and they strap him to the bed springs of a mattress that's had all the stuffing pulled out, and they put like electrodes on his gonads, and they're torturing him. He breaks free, he kills all 9 commies in the room, then he grabs the microphone, and he calls the main commie and says, I'm coming to get you myself. Now that is so Bruce Willis, like, running upstairs and trying to, like, call the police, right, for help is the complete polar opposite of that, and we knew it. Someone once said to me, well, you could not make Die Hard work today because everybody has cell phones. And I said, no, the only difference would be that Hans Gruber would decide on whether he would collect all the cell phones. You had one more moment where all the cell phones would be collected, right? But then he would go on Periscope, personally. Yeah. But that I was the first person to address the storytelling sabotage of the ubiquitous cell phones in Die Hard 2. He didn't have a cell phone, but he had a beeper. His wife tries to call him when he's sneaking up on one of the guards.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, and it beeps, and he has to fight with the guy with the icicle. I felt I had to address the fact that everybody had cell phones and beepers and stuff like that. So now, I trust me, I will never do the one where no service. That's what everybody gets around it. Now they go, no service batteries, so there's other ways of getting around it.
So, Stephen, to dive into the script a little bit, the film opens in this slightly unusual way that's intact in this draft. So we start in a 747 as it lands in LA. The moment just after landing where you let out the sigh of relief that you've made it in one piece. As the plane taxis to its gate, the passengers stir, gather personal belongings. We zoom in on John McClane, mid-30s, good-looking, athletic, and tired from his trip. He sits by the window. His relief on landing is subtle, but we notice. Suddenly, he hears from the seat next to him a salesman's voice. You don't like flying, do you? They get talking, and famously, now, the salesman advises him the best way to blow off jet lag is to take off your socks and shoes. Then you walk around on the rug barefoot and make fists with your toes. Now, of course, this interaction sets in motion one of the wildest elements of Die Hard. John having to take down this cabal of terrorists in his bare feet throughout the entire ordeal. Can you tell me where that idea came from? And whether that is actually a legitimate cure for jet lag? Is that something you made up?
I really cannot remember I'm sure the being scared to fly is definitely from Jeb. But I think I put in the fist with the toes, I'm not sure, but walking around barefoot or something. I think it was walk around a stretch or something like that. The important thing here is it grounded him as a normal guy.
Yeah.
Which is further reinforced when the limousine pulls up and he says, I never rode a limousine before. And he says, my first day driving one. And you see he's in the front seat. He again grounds him as a regular guy. So these are very, 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 very smart, clever things. And the other thing that follows suit with that is that Bruce, the actor, shows fear and terror throughout the film. Again, remember, when all the bad guys break in, he doesn't do a Stallone, I'll take him out right now. He spends the first act of the movie trying to call the police. He sets up a fire alarm, then he tries to find a working phone, then he steals the walkie-talkie, and he calls the police on a channel. And I kept this going in the second film. I did the second movie as well.
Yeah.
Where he was still scared to fly. He was still a technophobe. He didn't know how to operate the fax machine. And all that has gotten subsequently lost. The last couple of movies, he's all but a superhero.
Yeah.
He's flying all over the world. He's crashing cars into helicopters. He's jumping off buildings without being afraid. When he jumps off this building, he says, oh God, please let me live. All the way through, I was conscious of making him a relatable, real person, which I think is what made the picture work and what launched his career and the career of many of the other, more relatable guys. I mean, Keanu Reeves. Now not in the Lock movies, but in his other work. Being a more relatable hero. I'm talking about Point Blank. What's the movie with skydiving? Point Break. Yes, Point Break. Yeah. I think that was important, and it still makes a lot of films work. And of course, you still have the Die Hard in the White House, and the Die Hard on an airplane and stuff like that. But even in those, Harrison Ford also plays a very grounded hero. If you think about the beating he takes, and isn't that after Die Hard, Indiana Jones? What's the timeline?
Temple of Doom was 84, so the first one would have been 81, 82 or something.
All right, so it precedes.
Yes, as you mentioned, you do start on this moment of vulnerability that you then really hammer home by having him pick out the overhead compartment, this big giant teddy. So you're starting to get the sense of he looks tough, but there's this groundedness to him, a vulnerability. He then gets picked up in a limo by Argyle, and this character kind of offers a lot of comedic beats, but he's also pretty handy in this introductory scene in terms of exposition. So you and Jeb wrote him as kind of nosy, which forces John to open up to him, and in turn to the audience about his broken marriage. Can you tell me a little bit about that character and what you hoped he would bring to the film?
Well, he is kind of a surrogate for the audience because he's watching the whole movie. Yeah. And so just as the audience, you want to help the hero, he ends up helping the hero, which is actually, I'm going to get a little psychology of it because some of this accidental. He originally, he had it not been for the ambulance thing, which came at the last minute, he would not have had a moment of heroism. So it's funny it worked out that way. The movie stars were in alignment. But what's a very important contribution that Jeb made in the book, the character that is kind of a domino of a change that Jeb made. The character that overhears the walkie-talkie conversation from McClane character was a gypsy taxi driver. And this, remember, the book was written in the 70s, and at that time, there was a whole phenomenon in the United States, I don't know about elsewhere, of CB radios. Yeah. It was the equivalent of Twitter, maybe, where people had these CB radios, and prior to that, in order to broadcast, you had to have an FCC license for an amateur. It was called a ham radio. Right, okay. Ham radio, you had to get a license, it was only $50, and you could broadcast as long as you're under 50 watts. But now anybody can get one of these things, no license required. So it was a gypsy cab driver who happened to hear the recording, and it was his first interaction for a while until a police officer showed up. So Jeb combined the gypsy cab driver with the cop outside, with Al Pal. Yeah. But that raised the idea of what happened to the taxi driver. Somehow the taxi driver who was out of the movie sort of metamorphosized into the limousine driver, who in the book was just a small beat. Yeah. He had a small conversation with the guy. What happens in there's a taxi driver in New York in the book before he comes to LA that he has a conversation with about being a cop because somebody cuts them off in a moment of road rage, right? And the cop says, follow that guy. And then he goes, no, never mind. I got to catch a plane. What do you mean follow that guy? He said, well, I could have arrested him for that, So it's sort of like I don't know if you, as a writer, and I'm sure you do your shows, you're like crossing things out, you're moving paragraphs around, and then maybe you look at all the things you cut out and says, is there anything here that can go back in? Yeah. So you sort of see that happening here in the work process.
That's interesting. And there's a couple of really cool lines in this sequence. So McClane explains this is his first time riding in a limo, just as it's Argyle's first time driving one. He then explains why he can't move to LA. I'm a New York cop who used to be a New York kid, and I got a 6-month backlog of New York scumbags, and I'm still trying to put behind bars. Actually, it follows up a few moments later. We see John get to the party, and he's kissed on the cheek by a woman, and then he's kissed on the cheek by a guy as well, and he sort of sighs, California. There's a bit of a fish out of water element to that.
Totally.
And it's kind of like, so as well as being a Christmas movie, as well as being an action movie, as well as being an adventure process movie, it's also kind of fish out of water story.
Totally. Also, his wardrobe, he's dressed wrong for California weather. You're paying attention,
Yes, yeah. That's interesting. What was kind of
today
fun?
For California weather today, he'd be wearing a hazmat suit, but
yes, sadly so. I mean, that's obviously something that goes all the way back to the book. What do you think that lends to Die Hard? This sort of like the contrast of this like East Coaster in a West Coast situation. He doesn't really belong.
Well, I think in the book he had some disdain for the company his daughter worked at, and he also did not like what he had heard about the guy she was seeing. I think she's actually seeing what's his name in the book? The guy who was hitting on her.
Oh, Ellis.
Yeah, I think she's actually in a relationship with Ellis in the book. But there is much less of the fish out of the water thing in the book. In fact, we actually knocked him down a bit in the book. He's a retired detective with the rank of a senior detective or something, and he was in Army intelligence and an officer in the World War II. So he's a much more sophisticated, educated person in the book. And we knocked him down to more of a blue-collar character, in contrast with Alan Rickman. And again, talking about feedback, this is in a crazy way related to our casting director, Jackie Birch, and our costume designer, Marilyn Vance, who's an Academy Award-winning nominee, where they brought in Alan Rickman, who was one of the first people cast, and they brought in all this kind of like combat gear, military mufti, for him to wear. The costume department says he brought some stuff for you to look at, and she says, put Alan Rickman, in this stuff. It's ridiculous. And then she said, I'm going to cast the usual mooks. These guys from Europe, it's already in the script. There's this European versus American thing. Let's dress them like the Eurotrash guys you see in the nightclubs.
Yeah.
And then Jackie Burgess and Marilyn go, oh, totally, let's go that way. So as this, I was friendly with both of them. This got back to me. I went even further in dialogue that way. Remember, in the book, he's more of a thug, the terrorist. He's no more sophisticated than the hero. So you have to remember also at this time, there was this paranoia in America about foreign companies buying up America. It was a total xenophobic fear. The Japanese had just bought like one of the studios. I think a Japanese company briefly owned the Empire State Building. And there was all this fear about foreigners taking over America. So I embraced that and made it this blue-collar American versus this snotty European. And so that speech in the movie where he says, who are you, just an American who's seen too many movies, who thinks he's John Wayne, Marshall Dillon, that is totally embracing this split. Of course, what's funny about this whole thing with xenophobia, the Japanese and Germans, is the number one foreign ownership in America to this day is those insidious Dutch. But you never hear anybody wearing nor do they say Dutch uncle, nor do they say Dutch treat. It's those damn Dutchmen. I hear those wooden shoes coming closer in my sleep. But that's not but that doesn't work for the movie,
Hey everyone, this is Al, just jumping in to tell you that support for Script Apart this week comes from Cave Day. Revising scripts requires supreme focus. The best writers know they need to harness everything they've got to overcome internal and external obstacles. Cave Day lead group focus sessions for a worldwide community every day on Zoom that help you do just that. Think of it like a group fitness class, but for your work. A trained guide leads check-ins, deep work sprints, and energizing breaks. Members report they get 2 to 4 times more done with Cave Day's science-backed method. Join the world's most focused community and work alongside Emmy winners and Oscar winners. Gift cards are available and make a great present as we head towards the festive season, and Script Apart listeners can try it out for free. Head to caveday.org and type in the promo code ScriptApart, all uppercase, at checkout. That's caveday.org. Okay, let's get back to the conversation. We then get to the building, which, even in this draft, you describe as one of the stars of the film. Well lit, impressive, and spanking new, the Nakatomi building. So the entire movie's shot in this building. It's not just an exterior. People joke about locations as characters in movies. I mean, that's a bit of a cliche. But I really do kind of feel it applies to Die Hard. There's such a sense of geography that you and Jeb utilize so well. So yeah, how did you go about learning the contours of that space and writing the action for it? Did you have blueprints? Or were you
Absolutely. I was given a blueprint. There was I think about a year ago, there was a coffee table book that came out for Die Hard. You see it?
No, but I immediately want it on my Christmas list.
This giant coffee table book with inserts and photographs. It had and we actually had reproduced the blueprint, which is in a sleeve in the back. Yeah, the blueprint of the building. It's exact, which it was a blueprint of the building, and it was color coded for all of the actual locations that we were going to be using, so I could keep track of it as I wrote it. And I also walked through the building with the stunt team, right? And so some of the things that happen in the movie. So, for example, late in the picture when he has the hand-to-hand fight with it's only been 25 years. I didn't remember his name. With Gudinov, who was the guy with the long hair. When he has that fight with him, and they fall down some steps, they land on a furniture dolly, and they go across the room and fall off. That was really there. I said, we'll use that in the fight. You remember he strangles him and he hangs him unfinished floor, that was really an unfinished floor.
Yeah.
So when I saw an unfinished floor, I said, can we get permission to smash this all up? Because it's just like drywall and joists, like aluminum joists. You know, what the hell? Because I can knock it over. And when they fight, they destroy all the partially constructed stuff. So I was always a firm believer in using a location. I'm a huge Hitchcock fan, and if you look at the Hitchcock movies, he always uses the location. If you look at the original Man Who Knew Too Much, it's in Switzerland, right?
Yeah.
So the spy gets a message in a chocolate bar. Early in the picture, the guy goes up, he finds a candy bar, and the rapper says, you know, it tells him to meet somebody somewhere.
Yeah.
And foreign correspondent, they're trying to figure out how the Nazis disappeared and escaped the police chase, and then they notice a windmill is turning opposite to the wind. It's a signal for a plane to land.
Yeah.
You know, so the fight, the knockdown, drag-out fight in a saloon, in a cowboy movie, where it should be different, where you smash the mirror and you hit each other with liquor bottles and chairs, should be different than the knockdown, drag-out fight in a dentist's office. If I did a fight in a dentist's office, sooner or later the drill would become either the big lamp would be swung around, knock somebody on the head. At one point, somebody would have the drill. So, in a strange way, to go from the sublime to the ridiculous, from the ridiculous to the sublime, I think Die Hard is actually kind of a model of the classic Aristotelian unity of time, place, and action. Everything takes place in one place, right, in a short period of time. And it's a really excellent model of that. So the building was definitely it's a perfect pressure cooker for everybody. Yeah. And again, it established this model Die Hard in it, where other people try to encapsulate the same idea: Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard in the White House. And strangely enough, the Die Hard movies lost it.
Yeah.
After the second picture, it was no longer an isolated place.
That's interesting. I definitely want to come back to the sequels. But first, Argo agrees to wait while John enters the building to surprise Holly. And he has to use this keypad to inform the building system who he's here to see. And in this moment, Holly, it's revealed, has been using her maiden name, another beat that starts to sort of like feed in fractures in their marriage. McClane meets Holly's boss, who explains that this is not just a Christmas celebration, but a party marking a big deal worth $150 million. He's reunited with Holly, who says, "I was hoping you made that flight." John quietly replies, "I was hoping you were hoping that." John then notices this watch that Holly's been gifted for all her hard work, a little token of our appreciation, says Holly's boss. John takes Holly's wrist, holds it up and says, "Nice, but one of us is 4 hours out of sync." So two really smart things seem to be happening here in this sequence. So number one, you're showing the fragility of their marriage, and you're going from a moment of tenderness and potential reconciliation to like a sort of moment of pessimism about their future. And then number two, you're introducing the watch, which will come back in the final scene. Did you plant that here as a kind of Chekhov's gun?
Yes, but the watch was in the book.
Okay.
The watch was in the book. But it wasn't used in the same manner. But the watch was in the book. And of course, Holly, spoiler, she falls out of the building and dies. But she's also complicit in the machinations of the company in Indonesia. She's actually aware of it and was a participant in it. So she's a little dirty. She's a little dirty in the book, which is no longer there. What's interesting is there's very little improv in a movie like this, because improvising in a movie like this can get somebody hurt. Like if you're not standing where you're supposed to be standing and they set off the explosion, so there's very little improv in this movie. There's a couple of lines here and there. There's now I know what a TV theater feels like. Is that?
Yes, that's great, period. Just message me when you get here, period. It's a yellow house with blue shutters, period.
good for Bruce.
Yeah.
The scene where they argue, they seem to be getting along, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to stay with Kathy Roberts. We moved out to he moved out here somewhere to Ramona or something, Pomona." He says, "Oh, you'll be in the car for an hour and a half each way. Why don't you stay with me? I have a spare room. They're just starting to warm up." And then it suddenly turns into an argument.
Yeah.
I forget, you probably have the script in front of you. She says something, and he jumps. He says, "I thought my wife, they get into this," and it's a repeat of an argument they had. This is a scene where I forget how it came up, but I went off with Bruce and with Bonnie Bedelia, and they improvised a fight, a couple fight. And I just sat there and took notes, right, and incorporated some of their ad-lib into that scene that went into that script.
Yeah.
So presumably they brought their own experiences breaking up with somebody to that argument, and that's why that has a kind of a real plausibility to it. It's kind of petty and personal, and so it's very authentic. And then when she walks out of the room, Bruce realizes he was an idiot. He goes, "Nice going, nice going."
Yes. Head smack on the door. That wasn't in this script, so that was a moment of interest.
It's on the set, whether it was, I know it was Bruce or John, but it's a nice touch.
Yeah, it says so much. I love the introduction to our antagonist, or actually protagonist, as we discussed earlier in this draft. So we've had this Mercedes pull up front, and we've started to see the henchmen kind of file into the building and start taking out the sort of guy at the front desk and that kind of thing. We then get to a moment where the doors to a service elevator open to reveal Hans Gruber, impeccably dressed, lean and handsome. He steps out into the lobby like he owns the building, and in a way, he does. I mean, we touched on this a moment ago, but I just want to kind of re-emphasize that it seems like in the same way that you would try and build a different type of hero in John, you would try and build a different type of villain in Hans.
Oh, absolutely. But remember, he was discovered by our people, not by the greater world, the theater world. They saw him in Les Liaisons Dangereux. I don't know. Maybe I said that right. I don't know. It's been a long time since I played class. But anyway, he's playing this manipulative, suave villain.
Yeah.
So that's why he was cast in this picture. So we were embracing, what he had done. You will notice in James there that his introduction is not really coming out of the elevator. He comes in John decided, on the day, to have him come in the front door from the. He comes out of the elevator, doesn't he? Yes. The other guys come in the front door for the Mercedes.
That's right, yeah. Again, to go back to the vulnerability, to the much less gung-ho nature of John McClane compared to regular heroes, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, he spends the next few scenes, quite a bit of this opening act, hiding. Essentially, he's also trying to kind of get the police's attention. He's there being smart, learning about who these guys are, and amassing the information needed to take them down. But was there any studio resistance to this at all? Because, as we've touched on again and again, this was quite new. This is quite passive almost, instead of the kind of all guns blazing sort of action heroism that audiences and studio execs are used to.
There's no violence in this movie for 19 minutes, 19 or 20 minutes before that first thing happens. No, there wasn't. There was conversations like that on the Die Hard 2, which we said we'll get to later. But I think that in the script, I don't think you've got it in front of you. I'd have to go in the filing cabinet, but I don't think it turned out to be 20 minutes in the movie. But I don't think it's 20 pages in the script. I mean, you have to look at it. What page is that they kill the guy in the lobby?
That is on page 19.
Oh, it is about the same. But I don't know. I don't think anybody sort of caught that and said, "Gee, we should kill somebody sooner." We fortunately did not get that note. Now you would have a big battle if you went that long, without a violent beat. But I think it also what it really did is establish our characters, and gave the audience a vested interest in everybody. And that's why it was incredibly invaluable.
Yeah. And I think it makes the fact you wait for that moment of violence, it makes it so much more shocking when you get that 1-2 of first the sort of guy at the desk being killed, and then sort of Hans, for all his sophistication, he has that sort of interaction between with Holly's boss, and he's kind of talking about fashion, and he's mentioning kind of Fortune magazine all signifiers of sophistication.
Yes,
And then there's that line, I'll count to 3, there won't be a fool.
Yes, but prior to that, he says, I love the models when I was a boy. When Alexander saw his kingdom, again, all this stuff to show me he's like a snotty, sophisticated guy. And that I don't know that is not a real tailor in London. That's a made up tailor name. I wanted to name drop my tailor. Now I sound like an asshole, though. When I was a kid, I was in high school, the Esquire magazine used to always do.
I think that's about all the transfers I can apply. Everyone else is going to get one of these in this batch. So I'm going to put this with...
Do a special.
I am going to stop.